On a crisp August afternoon at the imposing stone gates of Balmoral Castle, Queen Camilla's meticulously planned summer empire collapsed in a matter of seconds. What Camilla just realized, standing by the heavy windows of her private drawing room expecting a fleet of media executives and strategic allies to arrive, is that she no longer controls the perimeter of her own royal existence. She had spent months transforming the Scottish estate into a high-powered retreat, fully expecting to host the ultimate public relations summit under the guise of a traditional royal holiday. Instead, her hand-picked convoy of VIPs was abruptly turned away by armed metropolitan police. Their names had been legally struck from the estate's security master list by an authority she could not overrule. This is the story of how Prince William executed a flawless administrative purge, using the boring mechanics of state-funded security to trap the queen consort inside a kingdom she fundamentally does not own. We are going to unpack the secret summer guest list Camilla attempted to sneak into the Scottish Highlands, the exact moment Prince William discovered the financial paper trail, and the chillingly quiet retaliation that left her structurally isolated on what was supposed to be her triumphant summer vacation. By the end of this account, you will understand how the illusion of absolute power shatters when confronted with the cold, immovable reality of commercial ownership and constitutional law. This is a forensic look at how the palace uses the mundane machinery of budget audits and security barcodes to turn a sprawling estate into a lethal weapon of containment, leaving Camilla to face a terrifying state of commercial desperation. To comprehend the sheer magnitude of this psychological defeat, one must first understand the towering fortress of influence Camilla had constructed, and specifically what the Balmoral estate represents. For decades, the Scottish Highlands served as the ultimate private sanctuary for the British monarch. Under the late Queen Elizabeth, Balmoral was a place of quiet, enduring tradition, tightly regulated by bloodline and unyielding protocol. Following her highly controversial ascension to the throne alongside King Charles, Camilla operated under the assumption that this ancient fortress was finally hers to command. She had played a 30-year game of calculated survival, successfully erasing the lingering institutional memory of Princess Diana and rewriting her own narrative from the most criticized figure in Britain to the anointed queen consort. She believed that her proximity to the king granted her absolute equity in the institution, and she viewed the sprawling Scottish estate as the perfect location to establish her own independent power base. Far away from the prying eyes of the London civil service, this sense of supreme dominance reached its absolute peak as the royal family prepared for the summer retreat of 2026, with King Charles requiring an extended period of quiet rest to manage his health. A subtle vacuum of power opened across the royal calendar. Rather than respecting the solemn private nature of the traditional Scottish holiday, Camilla's faction saw an opportunity for a staggering exploitation of the estate. She quietly initiated a massive structural overhaul of the summer guest list. Her plan was incredibly ambitious and deeply bureaucratic. She sought to merge the private social calendar of Birkhall, the king's personal residence on the estate, with the main state-funded security perimeter of Balmoral Castle. Camilla submitted a roster of names that included her non-royal children, extended family members, billionaire sponsors, and strategic public relations gurus. She was attempting to host a shadow court summit, designed to permanently elevate her inner circle and secure lucrative media alliances for the future. But the truly audacious part of her strategy lay in the financing. By integrating her private guests into the main Balmoral security grid, she was effectively mandating that the sovereign grant, the public taxpayer fund, pay for the armed protection logistics and elite catering of her non-royal entourage. It was a Trojan horse maneuver designed to legitimize her personal ecosystem by granting them the ultimate status symbol of top-tier state-funded royal clearance. However, Camilla drastically underestimated the meticulous forensic vigilance of Prince William. As the absolute controller of the Duchy of Cornwall and the heir to the throne, William has spent years quietly mastering the internal administration of the royal financial engines. He does not govern through emotional outbursts or media leaks. He governs through the precise, unforgiving machinery of estate management. The discovery of the paper trail happened during a routine financial audit of the summer. Deployment budget for the Metropolitan Police's Royalty and Specialist Protection Branch. When William and his top advisors reviewed the unusually high security expenditures requested by the Queen Consort's office, the true nature of the strategy became instantly clear. William recognized that this was not an innocent gathering of family for a summer holiday. It was a highly calculated attempt to weaponize the sovereign's private estate and public funds to build a rival power structure. For William, the threat to the integrity of the crown was unacceptable. It was a direct assault on the traditional boundaries of the monarchy and a blatant misuse of the financial apparatus he is destined to inherit. The institutional response from the Prince of Wales would be entirely professional, completely bloodless, and devastatingly precise. Instead of confronting Camilla in a screaming match or allowing the story to leak to the tabloids, William weaponized the administrative system itself. Utilizing his extensive authority over the sovereign grant allocations and consulting closely with the Home Office, a silent counter-strategy was put into motion. The retaliation was executed through the quiet signatures of senior security officials. William simply enforced a strict pre-existing constitutional mandate regarding taxpayer-funded protection. A directive was issued to the commanders of the Royal Protection Squad, stating that state-funded security perimeters at Balmoral were to be exclusively reserved for working royals, visiting heads of state and individuals performing direct constitutional duties. Any individual failing to meet these strict criteria required the express, written authorization of the Prince of Wales, or they would be legally barred from entering the protected zones. With a single stroke of an administrative pen, the clearance for Camilla's entire shadow court was completely revoked. William did not need to cancel her party. He simply removed the institutional scaffolding required to host it. He used the boring mechanics of budget compliance to build an invisible, impenetrable wall around the Balmoral estate, ensuring that the Queen Consort's illusion of absolute power would violently collide with the hard parameters of reality. The trap snapped shut with devastating visual precision on the first major weekend of the summer retreat. As the Scottish winds swept across the Highlands, a sleek convoy of private vehicles carrying Camilla's hand-picked VIPs approached the main security gates of the estate. The executives and extended family members arrived, expecting to be waved through by armed guards, fully anticipating a weekend of luxurious royal networking. But as their vehicles pulled up to the checkpoint, the gates remained firmly closed. The Metropolitan Police officers, adhering strictly to the newly audited master list, scanned the digital passes. The system flashed red. In a scene of staggering, quiet humiliation, the officers politely but firmly informed the occupants that their security clearance had been administratively revoked. They were denied entry to the inner estate and were instructed to turn their vehicles around on the public road. The visual humiliation was profound. As the convoy awkwardly executed a U-turn in front of the imposing stone pillars, distant long-lens cameras captured the undeniable retreat of Camilla's inner circle. They were cast out of the kingdom entirely neutralized by a protocol they could not even see. Back inside the fortified walls of the estate, Camilla watched from the drawing-room window as the reality of her situation crystallized. The side doors were locked. The security forces answered to someone else. And the grand summer summit she had spent months orchestrating had been dismantled without a single word being spoken. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She had spent decades maneuvering to become the undisputed matriarch of the House of Windsor, only to realize that the core institution had entirely insulated itself against her. Standing in the absolute silence of the Scottish castle, faced with the unmistakable forensic evidence of her strategic defeat, Camilla turned away from the window and sought out the one person who had always validated her ambition. She walked toward the king's private study, desperately demanding an immediate intervention, a reversal of the security orders, and a restoration of her administrative authority. She expected her husband to act as her absolute shield. But as she opened the door to face King Charles, she was about to encounter a chilling reality that would alter the balance of the royal family forever. The heavy brass-handled door of the king's private study at Birkhall closed with a soft final click, shutting out the rest of the Balmoral estate. Inside, Queen Camilla stood before her husband, her aristocratic composure entirely fractured by the humiliation at the main gates. She presented her grievances with the urgency of a reigning monarch demanding an immediate correction of state. She expected King Charles to pick up the telephone, summon the head of the Royal Protection Squad, and issue a swift reprimand to the security offices that had dared to turn away her hand-picked inner circle. She desperately needed him to overrule Prince William to reassert his absolute authority, and to prove that her position as queen consort granted her total equity in the kingdom. But what happened next was the ultimate psychological betrayal. As Camilla finished her demand, King Charles simply looked down at his desk. The silence in the wood-paneled room was deafening. The king, dealing with his own profound frailties and acutely aware of the shifting tectonic plates of power beneath his feet, offered absolutely no defense. He did not reach for the phone. He did not override his son's administrative orders. Charles is a pragmatist, and he understands the unyielding physics of the crown. Defending Camilla's attempt to use taxpayer-funded security to host a private public relations summit would mean openly fighting the very financial oversight mechanisms that protect the monarchy's survival. More importantly, it would mean declaring a factional war against the Prince of Wales, a war the current sovereign knows he cannot win. Charles chose the quiet, stable continuity of the institution over the immediate comfort of his wife. For Camilla, realizing that her ultimate shield had completely abandoned her to the bureaucratic machinery of the palace, was a devastating, irreversible blow. The silence from King Charles was not born out of malice. It was an admission of institutional exhaustion. It was the exact moment the devastating silence took hold, proving that a transitional monarch cannot fight the future when the future has already consolidated its power. She had spent 30 years meticulously maneuvering to stand as an equal partner at his side, only to discover that when the institutional knives came out, she was fundamentally alone. This chilling silence exposed the terrifying reality of commercial desperation that Camilla has spent decades trying to mask. When you strip away the majestic Scottish backdrop and the inherited tartans, the financial and territorial truth is profoundly humbling. Queen Camilla owns absolutely nothing of the royal empire. While Balmoral Castle is technically the private property of the monarch, the sprawling security apparatus, the estate staff, and the immense logistical engine required to maintain her lifestyle are funded by the sovereign grant and the Duchy of Cornwall. The duchy is entirely controlled by Prince William, and William's office now exerts massive influence over how the sovereign grant is audited and deployed. When William weaponized the security protocols at the estate gates, he was sending a clear, untraceable financial message. He was reminding Camilla that every inch of protected ground her guests walk on, and every armed guard that stands at her door, is authorized by the very institution she was trying to manipulate. Camilla simply does not have the personal capital or the sovereign authority to bypass William's administrative gates. Her ability to elevate her friends, to grant them access to historic castles, and to fund her strategic PR campaigns relies entirely on borrowed money and borrowed time. The moment the king passes her, access to this immense machinery will be instantly shut off. She will be legally relegated to the position of a dowager queen, forced to retreat to her modest private property in Wiltshire, leaving the grand state rooms of the Scottish Highlands far behind. The transition will not look like a grand retirement, it will look like an administrative eviction. While William ruthlessly managed the financial and administrative boundaries of the estate, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, executed a flawless visual and emotional takeover. A few days after Camilla's shadow court was turned away at the gates, Catherine arrived at Balmoral with Prince William and their children. The Princess of Wales did not need to engage in a territorial dispute or bring a fleet of public relations executives to validate her presence. She simply arrived and embodied the absolute moral authority of the future. As her vehicle approached the exact same imposing stone pillars where Camilla's guests had been humiliated, the gates swung wide open and the armed guards offered a crisp, unhesitating salute to the true heirs of the kingdom. Inside the castle walls, Catherine's presence was a masterclass in institutional correction. She did not need to scream or demand the center of attention. She simply stepped into the void, bringing the unmistakable aesthetic and moral weight of the late Princess Diana with her. When Catherine attended the traditional Sunday church service at Crathie Kirk on the estate, she stepped out wearing a tailored coat in a specific Highland tartan paired with Diana's iconic sapphire earrings. That detail matters immensely. In an environment where Camilla was attempting to erase the past and install her own legacy, Catherine weaponized royal tradition to execute a deliberate psychological checkmate. Every time Catherine smiled, shook a hand, or stood beside the king, the ghost of Diana flashed in the Scottish sunlight, serving as a forensic visual reminder of the true line of descent. It was a brilliant maneuver that physically linked the enduring legacy of the late Queen Elizabeth and Princess Diana directly to Catherine, entirely bypassing the Camilla era. The visual contrast was devastating. On one side stood a queen consort, trapped in a gilded cage of her own making, isolated from her allies, and abandoned by her husband's authority. On the other side stood a Princess of Wales, who commanded the absolute loyalty of the civil service, the unyielding protection of the security forces, and the full weight of the future. This silent eviction is being strictly enforced within the castle walls by Princess Anne, the family's most formidable guardian of protocol. Anne has never forgotten the damage inflicted upon her mother's reign by the scandals of the past. Working in tandem with William, Anne has ensured that the traditional rules of the Balmoral holiday are rigidly applied to contain Camilla's remaining influence. Dinners are formal, guest lists are strictly limited to working royals, and the daily schedule is entirely dictated by the bloodline hierarchy. What appears to be a sudden nostalgic adherence to old-fashioned etiquette is actually a strategic mechanism of containment. Anne and William have built an invisible wall around the core monarchy, ensuring that Camilla is treated as a temporary guest in a house that will soon belong entirely to the Wales family. Ultimately, this is why the story of the locked gates at Balmoral resonates so deeply beyond the walls of the palace. It exposes the brutal, unyielding nature of the British monarchy when it decides to protect its long-term stability. Camilla spent her entire life playing a brilliant game of personal strategy, manipulating the narrative to place a crown upon her own head. But she failed to realize that true power does not come from demanding the biggest title or inviting billionaires to a summer retreat. True power is understanding the boring, complex machinery of the institution. It is controlling the budget, mastering the security databases, and waiting for the perfect, highly visible moment to remind your opponent that they actually own nothing. When the final transition of the crown inevitably occurs, the world will not see a dramatic confrontation on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. They will simply see a woman being quietly guided through a side door, entering a private vehicle, and driving away toward an isolated retirement, while William, Catherine, and the true bloodline stand firmly at the center of the frame. The illusion of her absolute power will vanish into the administrative archives forever, proving that the appearance of dominance is nothing compared to the cold, permanent reality of the crown. Thank you for watching this deep dive into the hidden power dynamics of the royal family. If you found this forensic analysis insightful, please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and leave a comment below with your thoughts on how Prince William protects the future of the monarchy.